Okay, we're moving from the early 80s East Coast graphic slasher movement to the late 80s West Coast bubblegum slasher movement. What we have is pretty much the ultimate 1980s direct-to-video LA movie. LA director, LA actors, LA locations, LA philosophy. In other words, brain candy for the dimwits. And we love that here on the Last Drive-In Marathon. We live for that. I'm talking about Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama, featuring one of the nastiest performances ever given by Linnea Quigley, our #1 scream queen in the 80s. Linnea just loves playing a bitch. And this was one of her foul-mouthed punk queen classic roles. Excellent movie in the $100 budget range. I'm Joe Bob Briggs, and we're now heading into the Iron Man portion of the Dusk to Dawn horror marathon on Shudder. It's my swan song, my farewell to movie hosting, my affectionate tribute to the greatest scary movies of my generation, your generation, and our grandpappy's generations. And so you're probably wondering, why are so many of these movies from the 80s? And that's because, after careful analysis of all the movies in horror history, these were the cheapest ones. But also because in the 80s, there were a handful of directors in LA who decided, you know what, I'm not going to fight this new video thing. I'm just going to embrace it. And so they started turning out movies like one a week. There were suddenly hundreds of horror, action, sci-fi, sex comedy flicks coming out. Still happens out there today, but it's not as much fun. Okay, don't get me wrong, some of my best friends are in LA, like almost all the people in this movie. This was an instant cult classic when it came out in 1988. It's directed by Dave Dakota, who, of all the 80s directors, he's directed more movies than any of them. He's directed like 27,000 movies. It's the old story of a jive-talking mutant demon who lives in a bowling trophy and likes to turn sorority girls into raving sex-maniac lasagna-faced zombies. Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama, starring Linnea Quigley, Brink Stevens, and Michelle Bauer, the big three of 80s scream queens. This is a movie where you may recall Linnea has her famous line, "What is this, the Midnight Wimp Bowling League?" So let's look at the drive-in totals and get it going. We have 8 dead bodies, 10 breasts, 1 slime demon, 1 motor vehicle crash, 1 jive-talking midget monster who talks like Barry White hosting a game show, half-naked lesbianic dual spanking ritual, extended shower scene that's necessary to the plot, reverse bitch slapping, projectile puking, expendable she-demon supporting actors, extended Michelle Bauer nymphomaniac demonic writhing, if you know what I mean, and I think you do, 1 deadly taffy pull, 1 flaming pledge leader, kung fu, bimbo fu, punk girl fu, whipped cream fu, giant handgun fu, and of course, bowling ball fu. Heads roll. And when I say heads roll, I mean 1 head rolls all the way down lane 27. Scene-stealing cameo by the great Buck Flower as the old coot janitor. 4 stars. Check it out, and then I'll be back with some more information that you won't need at any time in the rest of your life at each of the breaks. So roll the film. Yes, things are wild at the Camino Plaza Shopping Center in Carlsbad, California, where this movie was filmed in 9 days by the amazing Dave Dakota. Now, since this is a Dave Dakota movie, there will be absolutely no plot to get in the way of the story. This thing will move like lightning, slowing down only for naked breasts and butts and the occasional bloody head. Speaking of which, how many times did Babs hit the butts of Michelle Bauer and Brink Stevens in that scene? Enough times to draw blood, and apparently way too many times for the United Kingdom Movie Classification Board, because all that hiney paddling was cut out of the British release, because in Great Britain, where they actually do that as schoolgirl punishment, hitting bare-naked female asses with a giant stick is no laughing matter. So, this is the first starring role for Linnea Quigley. Dave Dakota was such a big fan of hers that he just gave her the script and said, you can play any part you like in this movie. And so, of course, she chose to play Spider the Punk Girl. Linnea Quigley was at the peak of her popularity in 1988. She actually made 6 films that year, including Nightmare Sisters, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Dead Heat, Night of the Demons, and the immortal Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. Now, she'd been around for a long time. Davenport, Iowa girl she went to Hollywood, started acting while she was working at a health spa, and she first got noticed as the Dream Girl in Fairy Tales in 1978, and her breakout role was Return of the Living Dead, where she was the hot punk girl who dances naked on top of the tombstone. Linnea has made 125 films, is known as a total sweetheart. She's one of the most popular guests at fan conventions. Brink Stevens and Michelle Bauer, the 2 sorority pledges, they were the other 2 iconic scream queens of the 80s. And in fact, Dave Dakota did a movie as late as 2014 called 3 Scream Queens, starring Michelle, Linnea, and Brink. But Dave was just starting out his career in 1988. He'd been in Hollywood for about 8 years, came down from Canada, got work for Roger Corman as a production assistant. And then his first feature was in 1986, and he would end up doing 138 films. Who works that hard these days? Over the next 30 years, he's still turning them out today. He's especially well known for his collaborations with Charles Band at Full Moon Entertainment. He did one of the Puppet Master films, many others for Charles Band. And Charles likes Dave because Dave shoots them hard, fast, and dirty. Okay, roll it. We'll have more Slimeball trivia at the next break. Hard, Fast, and Dirty should be a movie title, you know. Or a nickname for the 3 Scream Queens, you know. One of them's hard, one of them's fast, one of them's dirty. I know all 3 of them, so, and I'm not saying which is which, but I'm thinking it though. I think I know which is hard, which is fast, and definitely which is dirty, so damn. So, radiation pulses through the security cameras and zaps 2 random sorority girls and turns them into she-demons or something. I didn't really see any explanation for why that would happen, and the imp was doing a lot of talking, so he could have explained it. The original title of this movie, by the way, was The Imp, but almost everybody who looked at the dailies saw that the obvious title had to be Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama. It just hit you like a ton of bricks, and so they made that change. And speaking of random she-demons, why are there only 3 girls in this whole sorority? Remember the scene at the sorority house? 3 sorority members and 2 pledges. I mean, I know it's low budget, but that's it? I mean, we're world's smallest sorority. And now the only one left is Babs. I mean, the only non-zombie member left in Tri-Delt. Babs was played by Robin Rochelle, and if you look her up online, you won't find that name. The only name you'll find under her listed under is her birth name, Robin Still, which kind of burns my bacon because they don't list you under Cary Grant's birth name or John Wayne's birth name or Kirk Douglas's birth name, which was Isser Danielovich, by the way. They only do that for B-movie people. And also, Michelle Bauer's billing in this movie is Michelle McClellan. But that's because sometimes she was Bauer, sometimes she was McClellan, had something to do with who she was marrying or unmarrying or whatever, but we're going to call her Michelle Bauer because that's what most people know her by. So the point of this movie is 6 hot babes and 3 nerds combine in violent, occasionally naked ways. Now notice that ratio because that's the whole secret to this movie. Filmmaking 101. You're welcome. Okay, back to the flick. Plus the jive puppet. I love the jive puppet. The movie was criticized for the jive puppet. The imp is the heart of the movie. Go. Plus you have the symbolic sexual imagery of a bowling alley. You have balls, you have pins, and you have lanes, and you have gutters. We're going for the gutter. And we're staying in the gutter. Symbolism. Okay, this is the part in the middle where Dave Dakota just throws everything he has at the screen and sees what sticks. Because we had a bowling alley door that electrocutes Babs through some kind of imp demon magic that we previously didn't know anything about. We had gold turned into wood. We had Brink Stevens' prom dress turned into tatters. We have one of the sorority bitches turn Bride of Frankenstein and get her she-demon sister to go all kung fu on Brink, while Michelle Bauer is sexing that guy to death. Let me just stop right here and say, that's how I want to die, okay? Then we have the operative symbolic image of the movie, a head literally rolling. We have continuous unmotivated puking. We have the normally street-savvy Linnea Quigley barricading a room with cardboard boxes. We have a giant gun that has no effect on a she-demon. We have a gratuitous cold cream application interlude. And we have a guy's head slammed down on a hot stove while that mischievous imp wisecracks a line about crispy critters. If you're wondering what's going on, only Dave Dakota knows. But we keep watching, don't we? Because Michelle Bauer just sexed a guy to death. And we have the clever gender reversal relationship between Linnea and Andrus Jones, who's the actor who plays Calvin. But wait, there's more! Back to the movie. You know how actors always talk about how there has to be subtext? You know, the scene is not about what the scene appears to be about. There's always something going on below the surface. If they don't have subtext, they can't act that scene. And so the subtext here for Linnea Quigley would be, holy for holy, I'm getting horny for this nerd. That would be her subtext that she works from. And the subtext for Andrus Jones would be, that's actually not subtext. Guys don't have subtext, only girls have subtext. That's the late, great Buck Flower as the janitor doing all the exposition for the whole movie in one brilliant scene. And that story he tells about Dave McCabe, the gutterball bowler in 1956 who used demonic spells to become the tournament champion. Dave McCabe is the actual name that Dave Dakota used when he was directing porn films, so that's a little inside joke. Well, Babs burned up real good there in the Molotov cocktail scene, don't you think? That actress was Robin Still. She was 26 years old at the time of this movie, and she only lived 8 more years. She was also known for Slumber Party Massacre, American Ninja 4, but she had a drinking problem, and she died by suicide in 1996. Sorry to bring everybody down with that, but I should also mention Andrus Jones as Calvin. Andrus was only 19 years old when he made this movie, which was his first movie, and he's been in several films. He's probably best known for Nightmare on Elm Street 4. He's primarily a musician. He fronts a band called The Previous, and like most musicians, he's a little offbeat. He's into Kabbalah, you know, that religion that Madonna does. I don't really understand it. He hosts a show called Radio 8 Ball, where people call in questions, and then the questions are answered by randomly selected songs. It's like musical tarot cards. So that's Calvin. Probably his best movie was The Attic Expeditions with Jeffrey Combs in 2001, if anybody saw that. Okay, it's time for the logical conclusion to Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama. Let's go. You know, it's the word slimeball that doesn't belong in the title, because who's the slimeball? There's no slimeball. The imp? You wouldn't call him a slimeball. He's just a little midget bitch demon. You know, we need to call Dave up and ask him, why slimeball? Who you calling a slimeball, huh? Because nomenclature matters on these things.